This resolution upholds the institutional power of the House by recommending that the House find Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress for failing to comply with the Judiciary Committee's subpoena. It's very simple. Attorney General Garland holds information vital to the committee's legislative oversight and the House's impeachment inquiry. Attorney General Garland has refused to comply with the committee's subpoena, and only belatedly did President Biden invoke an invalid executive privilege assertion over the audio recordings. Special Counsel Robert Hur stated on page 1 of his report, quote, "Our investigation uncovered evidence that President Biden willfully retained and disclosed classified materials after his vice presidency when he was a private citizen," end quote. Joe Biden not only kept information he wasn't allowed to keep, he also shared it with people who weren't allowed to see it. He shared that information with his ghostwriter. Special Counsel Hur stated on page 231 of his report that President Biden, quote, "had strong motivations to ignore the proper procedures for safeguarding the classified information in his notebooks. He decided months before leaving office to write a book," end quote. A book for which Joe Biden received an $8 million advance. But all this, and Special Counsel Hur declined to prosecute President Biden because Joe Biden is, quote, "a sympathetic, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory," end quote. Following the release of Special Counsel Hur's report, both the Judiciary and the Oversight Committees issued subpoenas requiring Attorney General Garland to turn over the transcripts and audio recordings of Special Counsel Hur's interview with President Biden and his ghostwriter, among other information. To date, Attorney General Garland has failed and refused to produce these audio recordings. To determine whether Special Counsel Hur appropriately carried out justice by not prosecuting the president, the recordings are necessary. The transcripts alone are not sufficient evidence of the state of the president's memory. This executive branch has a history of changing transcripts. In late April, during a public speech, President Biden read a teleprompter instruction to pause. He stated, quote, "Imagine what we could do next, 4 more years, pause," end quote. But when the White House put out the transcript, it didn't include the word pause. In that case, and in this case as well, the video and audio recording is the best evidence of the words that President Biden actually spoke. The department's refusal to produce the audio recordings of Special Counsel Hur's interviews with President Biden amounts to a demand that the committee trust the department created and produced interview transcripts are accurate and complete. Following the issuance of the subpoenas, and despite repeated follow-up from the committee, the department continued to withhold the audio recordings of those interviews without providing any constitutional or legal basis to do so. And then hours before the committee was set to meet and consider this contempt resolution, the department notified the committee that President Biden had asserted, at the Attorney General's urging, no less, executive privilege over the audio recordings. This belated assertion of executive privilege fails for numerous reasons. First, President Biden has already waived any potential assertion of executive privilege over the information discussed in his interviews with Special Counsel Hur by releasing the transcripts of those interviews to the media. Similarly, during Watergate, a federal district court held that President Nixon had waived any claim of executive privilege over certain audio recordings of his conversations because he had already published transcripts of those conversations. Second, President Biden's assertion of privilege is not valid because it is more than 2 months late. Any privilege should have been asserted by March 7, 2024, the subpoena return date. Third, President Biden has not set forth any valid reasons for invoking executive privilege. During these interviews, he was not receiving advice regarding the execution of his presidential responsibilities. Rather, he was sitting for an interview with a special counsel investigating whether he mishandled classified documents while he was a private citizen. Fourth, the law enforcement concerns set forth by the executive branch lack merit and are outweighed by the committee's need for the audio recordings. There is just no reason to believe that individuals will be substantially less likely to cooperate with department investigations of both an interview transcript and audio recordings are produced to Congress, as opposed to just the interview transcript. The department has a legal obligation to turn over the requested materials pursuant to the subpoena. Attorney General Garland's willful refusal to comply with our subpoena constitutes contempt of Congress. Our oversight and impeachment responsibilities are too important to allow Attorney General Garland to willfully and unlawfully disregard our lawful subpoena. With that, I yield back.